Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane. I'm a wife, mom, and business owner. I also write at hollykane.org, where I focus on my passion for women's ministry.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Hey friend, you're listening to episode 86 of the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, and this is the second episode in our Simplify series. Today, you're going to hear from Elissa Joy Watts. I met Elissa at the Hope Writers Conference that I attended last fall, and the whole story of how we ended up rooming together is quite amazing. But let's just say this. I believe God meant for us to meet. And I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. You're going to hear about Elissa's leadership journey and how some unexpected life circumstances forced her to simplify. And she shares what she learned along the way and how she's still in process and still learning. There's so much gold in this conversation, and while I know it's one of our longer episodes, I hope you'll stick around until the end. Elissa shares some wisdom with us about what leadership means to her and how her definition of success has changed, what we gain from stillness, and why she has decided to take a year off from social media. We also chat about why we should be okay with crying and what you really need when your life feels out of control. Before we dive into our conversation, let me tell you a little bit more about her. So Elissa Joy Watts is the managing editor for Simplify magazine, a quarterly digital publication for mindful modern families, founded by Joshua Becker and Brian Gardner. She'd rather introduce herself as an analog favoring work in progress and leave you with a word of encouragement. You can simplify your life and still be a leader before you end up unconscious and face down on the floor. Since leaving her corporate job and suffering from a frightening seizure as a new mother in a foreign country, Elissa has learned the importance of paring down and taking one day at a time. Raising kids in a tiny Scottish apartment taught her that less is always more. Living out of suitcases for 13 months straight after returning to Canada confirmed it. The lesson is, if you ask Jesus to be your story's undeniable hero, expect the unexpected and hold on tight. All right, friend, I'm so excited for you to hear this conversation with Elissa Joy Watts. And just as you heard me share just now, there is a difficult story that she shares in this episode. So if you have kids, it may or may not be something that you want to have them hear or be around for. So just be aware of that as you get going into this episode. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. All right. Welcome, Elissa, to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Esther. It's so good to be here.
Yes. Awesome. So why don't we start off with you just telling us a little bit about yourself and what your life looks like right now?
Okay. Gosh. Well, I feel like it could change on a dime. It will be interesting to see how things have changed by the time this airs. But I am a stay-at-home mom / freelancer, where I've got 3 kids and 1 on the way. So in about 3 weeks, we're going to meet little Ben, number 4. Our kids are 8, 6, 2, and then fresh. And yeah, we live in,
I love that.
Well, I don't know. He's probably going to be late, so a couple weeks maybe. But yeah, we live in Hamilton, Ontario right now, and we've been around. Our family has moved quite a bit, so it feels very strange to actually say like we live in Hamilton or we live in Vancouver, but we have been around quite a bit. But I freelance. I am a writer, and I've had the pleasure of doing all kinds of different writing projects over the years, whether it's corporate communication or blog lifestyle content. I've done some copywriting. Most recently, I have stepped into an editor role for Simplify magazine, which is an online quarterly. It was started by Joshua Becker and Brian Gardner. So Becoming Minimalist and No Sidebar, respectively. And it's been amazing. It's been absolutely amazing. Tons of fun, lots of interesting people, lots of life lessons along the way. And yeah.
Okay.
I guess, does that sum it up for you?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a good glimpse of what life is like right now. So I'd love to just hear what your perspective is on leadership. Do you consider yourself a leader?
Oh man, that's a hard question to answer because I'm of two minds. My knee jerk is the answer is no, because former definition of a leader was, working in a corporate situation and having direct reports and someone else to answer to. And insofar as that goes, I would not consider myself that kind of leader now because I'm self-employed and I get to, draw up my own hours and I'm at home with the kids and it just looks different. And so part of me wants to shirk the title of leader, but I am also somebody who believes firmly in personal responsibility. And I have the responsibility every single day to show up as a leader in my own life. And so, I guess short answer, yes, I'm a leader. There you go. Thanks for drawing it out of me.
Well, and I know when I met you, we actually met at Hope Writers Conference and we roomed together. And so we had never actually met in person before. And just from our first few conversations, I think that there's that whole question of natural leader versus developed leader, whatever, is it instinctual or not? But I definitely had the impression from just meeting you and talking with you that you are someone who has a passion for life and a passion to help others and serve others and share a message. And I think that's a big part of leadership, so I think that's part of what drew me to hearing more of your story and wanting to share it on the podcast, because I think it will connect with a lot of people. So let's hear a little bit about your leadership journey. And part of why I wanted to have you on the podcast today is because when we were together, you told me a lot about how you ended up having to simplify your life and do a lot of things because of life circumstances. So I'd like to have you share with us about that journey and what some of what you learned along the way. So let's just start with, how did your leadership journey bring you to a place where you had to simplify things?
Okay. That is such a good question. All right. So I feel like somebody tapped me on the shoulder and whispered in my ear that they saw leadership potential in me when I was very young. As an elementary school kid, I was helping ESL students who had just arrived to Canada. I was helping them, learn the language and find what they needed and settle in. And this theme of stepping up to help people and the responsibility that I could step into, that leadership role, was something that I was aware of at a young age. And so those are my earliest memories of somebody looking me in the eye and being like, "You're a leader. This is great. Way to go. Keep it up." And as I grew older, went through school, got through high school, I was involved in a lot of clubs at my school. And that's when things kind of started to get gain a bit of momentum. But then I graduated early and I opted to take a gap year. And then I sort of pivoted and felt like, I don't know exactly what I want to study. And I don't want to just jump in because it's what I'm supposed to do next. I don't want to just follow this script and think that maybe it's going to work out. So I started to kind of march to the beat of my own drum. And I found myself randomly, after working as a barista, I found myself tutoring high school students. And so that was this first opportunity for me to start experiencing life as my own boss. And I learned a lot, messed up a lot, had a ton of fun, met some wonderful people, and then decided I wanted to go back to school to teach. And while I did, about halfway through, I was going to transfer to a different school. At the time, I was working for what was then a very small local business called Lululemon Athletica, which, of course, people now are like, where? Not small, not quite so small anymore.
Yeah.
Nope. But, it was founded in 98, and we're talking 2004, I guess. So it was a small Vancouver-based athletic apparel company, and I was just working part-time. while I was, studying and tutoring on the side. And in doing so, someone challenged me and they said, look, I think the things that you're studying are great, but I think you're not taking enough risks. It's too safe. You love people, you love hospitality, you love food. And I see that in you, and I'm going to challenge you. I think you need to drop out. And that was pretty scary. And this is that like personal responsibility thing. It's like, okay, but if I'm following someone else's lead and I'm following the narrative arc of like broad society that says you finish high school, you go to university, you get your paper, and off you go. Like, it was a little terrifying, but it haunted me for about a year. And then finally I decided, I'm going to do it. I'm going to drop out. I'm going to go to culinary school. And then you kind of like fast forward a bit. So in that time, I went to school, I met my husband, we got married. First year of marriage was totally ridiculous and hard as can be.
Yeah.
I will spare all the 4-letter words that are so tempting. They're just like poised on the tip of my tongue, but I will not go there. But after, what happened was I started working for this catering company, and then I got in a car accident. And I feel like that is one of the little moments in the story that deserves a spot on the map, because it caused me to hit pause and reevaluate my values and my goals. It helped me clarify that I was not interested in working on my feet all the time if I wanted to actually be able to stand, because my back was really messed up. And it also made me realize if I do have deep, deep desires to be a mom who is able to fully engage with her children at home, I cannot be working in the food and hospitality industry in the context within which I was currently working. So I had to do a little, a little soul searching. And then I was having coffee with a girlfriend one day, a friend from my Lululemon days. And she said, hey, Liz, come on back to the office because we have a call center now, because we have just opened up in America. It was like all brand new. It was all exciting. Like we have a head office with a little call center, and there's like 8 or 9 of us, and you can sit on a ball and your back can heal and you can look for other work while you're there. That's the problem. Like we need some help. It's, holidays are coming. So I ended up coming full circle and going back to the company. And while I was there, the gist is that through my email correspondence with people, my writing got noticed. And I'd always loved to write, but I had never pictured it as an actual thing, like a thing that could actually fill my days and bring me joy and pay the bills. Like, it never dawned on me. This would have been around 2008 too. So blogging was starting to become a thing in the culture, I guess. So what happened was, within about a 12-month period of time working at this call center, my back healed. I got really crystal clear on my vision and goals. And I started getting my writing noticed by these like other people in the company. And I was working with people, you've got contacts then across the whole company, different departments. You're interacting with people on the PR side and the retail floor and operations and all these company departments. I started to learn a lot about the business. I started getting really fascinated by the business. And then this opportunity came up for a position in communications. And I was encouraged to go for it. So I did. I ended up getting it. And it was a huge surprise. And honestly, I think this is a big thing. I'm realizing this more and more as I get older. Because I had dropped out of university to pursue my passion in culinary arts, I was dealt a really strong hand in imposter syndrome. And I played those cards in my head all the time. I was like, you'd come up against well, who am I to have this position? And who am I to be answering to like the director of operations? Like, what? I dropped out of college so I could like learn how to make pastry and feed people and love them in that act and serve them that way. And like, yes, I love to write and I'm fascinated by the business and I understand the business, but like, I also have so much to learn and everybody's flying by the seat of their pants. And it was just so crazy. But in that situation, like I had to really step up. I was hosting conference calls with people from like across the US and Canada. And I learned a lot about what it means to just like get on with it. Just not like fake it till you make it has a role. I guess sometimes you have to be prepared. You have to learn. You have to be prepared. You have to own your mistakes. But I did. It was a really, really crazy steep learning curve. And I feel like within about, 6 months or so of that role, I started to feel like I had a pretty good handle on things. And that is just before I found out I was pregnant with our first little baby.
Yeah.
Oh man, talk about flipping the script. So if I can paint a little picture for your audience, around that time, my husband was finishing up his first master's. So I was supporting our family. We had no children. It was us.
Right.
Yeah. I was supporting us. We had a fun little apartment right in the heart of the city. Of course, he's like off doing school stuff. I have this corporate job. I love it. You get to walk to work every day through all the like beautiful waterfront park space in Vancouver. And I loved it. And it felt like I never felt hot-headed about it. I was very grateful for it, but I didn't really realize what I had until it was gone. And that's when I realized that my definition of my life had a grip on me. So I'm going to like fast forward, touch back, just to give you guys a little bit of a picture of where we were at. So Steve and I had been preparing since we got married. We'd been preparing to eventually go overseas so that he could continue to study, do his PhD. We weren't sure where that would be, but we did know once we'd be married, we'd have a couple years in Vancouver, and then we would be moving on to somewhere eventually. So when I found out I was pregnant and we did the math, we realized, oh boy, we're going to be leaving the country. At that point, we knew like, okay, we're going to Scotland. We're going to Scotland, St. Andrews University, or pardon me, the University of St. Andrews. Can't get it backwards. At that point, it was on the horizon. And we're like, okay, if I'm pregnant now, this baby's coming in June and we're moving in September. This is real. This is like, we do not have a lot of time. So basically what happened within a very short period of time is I went from being a very confident, physically fit, strong-minded, like emotionally healthy, high-achieving, performing person to a woman who was like 80 pounds overweight. Well, I guess by the time I moved, I was 60. But I put on so much weight with babies. So I was like hugely overweight. I did not feel like I belonged in my body because I was like this unwelcome guest. I was in physical pain. I was, packing up my entire life, saying goodbye to all the people I loved. I had never moved that far away ever. Thankfully, we knew one couple in St. Andrews, like we had just met over email, and we knew another family in Glasgow, friends. So there were like a few people on the other side, but otherwise we were complete strangers. And, God bless the Queen. It is a good thing to leave a Commonwealth country and go to the UK, but it's still very, very new and different. So when we landed there, all of a sudden my identity totally imploded and I got very homesick and very depressed. And there I was with this sweet butterball baby named Isaac. And he was a sunshine in the midst of a very, very thick, dark storm for us. And that really challenged my identity as a leader because I felt like before I had a pretty good grasp on how to perform during my day, how to hit the metrics, tick the boxes and everything, and someone swings by and will pat you on the back and say like, kudos, let's go for lunch. Here's a bonus or like whatever, like you get that recognition when you're in a setting like one that I was at Lululemon. There's all that comes with it. So yeah, it was really different. And that I think, well, if we're going to talk about simplification, this is a good point to pause and say, and that is where the story begins.
Yeah. I can imagine you've shared so much here in this journey of just really like, I think that point of recognizing my definition of success and my definition of what I want in my life to look like it sounds like that completely shifted when you moved. And so, how did that feel? Just that experience of having that complete shift in life stage, parenthood, career, all of it all at once.
Yeah, it was really hard. And it was challenging because I never, ever saw myself working in a corporate setting, it's not because I didn't necessarily want to or feel like I wasn't capable of it. It never really dawned on me. And when I was growing up, my mom was at home with my brother and I when we were little, and with me and my brother, I should say. That's incorrect. And I loved it. She was a huge blessing. Having a mom who was always at home, who was there, it was a huge gift. And so I longed to give that to my children. This is when I say I longed to give that to my children, that was like starry-eyed 22-year-old Elissa planning her future as a mom, by the way.
Right.
That was
right.
That was me forecasting, projecting into the future. And so when I tasted life as an achiever pre-kids, I thought, this is really great. I really like this. I could do this. And I think I could do this with kids in the mix. We can make it work. This would be all right. I'm nimble. We can do this. I'm young. And then once I actually did go on mat leave and we did start a family, and then it was kind of like this, someone pulled the rug out from under me. Part of me was like mourning the loss. And the other part of me was like, but Liz, this is what you always wanted. This is what you always wanted. You wanted to be at home with your child exclusively. You wanted to pour all your love and attention and like all that, spend all that time nurturing. Like, why are you sad? You should be rejoicing. This is wonderful. And so I had a kind of this twofold tension because I was wrestling with losing something, losing the former life. And I was also wrestling with the fact that I was wrestling with that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It
You know what I
does.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
It was really challenging. And so, yeah. And then to be, of course, like in a totally different context and to be also combating culture shock to some extent and homesickness. Like it was really, really, really complicated.
So take us forward now. You mentioned that this is where really the simplifying part of your journey began. So tell us what brought you to the simplification here in Scotland.
Okay. So I'm going to give you the story of 2 days. January 1st, 2012. 60-pound overweight Elissa feels like, man, oh man, it's time to get moving. Baby weight's got to go. It's a sunny day in Scotland. We live on the coast. They filmed Chariots of Fire down the street from my apartment. I am going to go run the beach. I'm going to go have that like glorious Chariots of Fire moment running on the coastline. And so, of course, I'm like such a keener because I used to be like super fit. And so I like lace up my shoes and I'm all excited. Bye, honey. I'm going to go for a run now. Bye, Isaac. I like kiss him, he's in his little high chair, whatever. And off I go. And it's radiant and sunny and crisp. And I'm running down the Scores, which is a street that's parallel to the coastline. And it's lined with trees and cobblestone. It's absolutely stunning. And then I get to the beach and I'm winded, like really winded. But I'm like, no, I can do this. I am full of adrenaline. I am a mom. I have that like mama bear thing going on. And I hit the sand and I start running and I feel amazing, really amazing. But then I thought, you know what? I should be smart because I haven't done this in a long time. And I need to be wise because of my car accident injury. I needed to be just gentle with myself. So I decide to pivot and turn for home. Well, then of course the wind is blowing the other way. And so now instead of the wind at my back, the wind is kicking sand up in my face. And I'm like looking at all the tourists and I'm sweaty and gross. And like, it was a long journey home from there, but I got there and I felt amazing. But the next morning, we have a rough night with baby. Isaac was sleeping in our room and it was a 1-bedroom flat. It was challenging. The logistics of our home at that stage were very challenging. So my husband and I were taking turns waking up and it was my turn to sleep in and he was, up with Isaac really early. But as Steve got out of bed to be with Isaac, I was awake enough to think, oh boy, I'm really stiff. And if I stay in bed and rest, I will feel rested, but I will also be incredibly stiff. And what if I just take, 20 minutes right now, instead of resting a little longer, I could just hop up on my yoga mat, do a couple stretches and off we go.
Yeah.
And this is when I need to tell your audience that I have epilepsy. So I was diagnosed at 19 and I have a form of epilepsy. It's called juvenile myoclonic epilepsy, and it's not characterized by large seizures, the kind that people generally associate with epilepsy if they're unfamiliar with it. So my husband and I both, we never expected that to be a part of our story. And I would get these little muscular twitches if I was very, very, very tired or physically fatigued, or if I hadn't eaten a meal and my body was kind of fighting stress. You know, in those kind of situations where people normally might just get the shakes and get hangry, like I was at risk for these little muscular twitches. On that particular morning, though, on January 2nd of 2012, I got up to stretch on my yoga mat, and Isaac was hanging in the door bouncer of our flat in the kitchen, just opposite the foyer where I was, and Steve was in the shower. And I got up to stretch, and about a couple minutes in, I said to him, like, honey, I don't feel so good. And I just kind of like got down to go into like child's pose on my mat and just stretch out. And the next thing I know, I am face down. My cheek is throbbing. I can like taste blood in my mouth. I am covered in drool. And I hear these heavy boots stomping through the kitchen and these thick accents, like thick Scottish accents. And like I'm seeing medical equipment. I was so confused. And I like looked up, and there's my husband, and he's like, the color is drained from his face. And I asked, like, what's going on? And he said, babe, you had a seizure. And oh my gosh, I'm like tearing up. It was terrifying. And, gosh, you know, I don't like talk about it much because it was, I've had a couple since, so it's not really like a new thing, but the first one was really, really frightening because it wasn't supposed to happen. And when it happened, we were miles from the people we knew and loved. And my husband dialed 911, as you do, because that's what you're trained to do when you're a little person and there's an emergency. But of course, in the UK, it's not 911, it's 999. And so my husband gets on the phone to, you know, call emergency, and then the number doesn't go through, and he's panicking and he doesn't know what to do. And thankfully, our son was hanging in the doorway, but it was quite a shock. So, sorry, I'm going to pull these tears in a little bit, rein them in.
It's okay.
So that was a defining moment in my story. It was the moment that I realized that I was not invincible, and that life could have, like, thankfully Steve was home and Isaac was safe and everything was okay, but that, like, had I been standing, I could have hit my head, or had I been alone without Steve, Isaac could have risked hurting himself. And you know, your mind is really creative at all the what ifs in those kinds of situations. And so I had to come to grips with the fact that my body had limits and that I wasn't invincible after all. And that by me not caring for my body, I was actually putting my son and my husband at risk too. And that it wasn't just a me thing. I think in my 20s, when I was newly diagnosed, my roommates would tell you that I was horrific. Oh, I was so bad. I'd taken my meds. I was so forgetful, and I was like, whatever, it's not a big deal. I can do this. No big, like I was just in denial. And so when as soon as it was like, no, Elissa, you're actually a mom, you have a medical condition, and you have a child and a husband that you also are responsible for, something's got to give now. And so that moment on my yoga mat on the floor for me was like when it all stopped. At that point, I was just with Isaac during the day. I wasn't working, but I had to reassess what my life was already moving in the direction of simple, you know, just by virtue of the fact that we had fewer friends. I was on mat leave, fewer responsibilities, etc. But, you know, you're still plugging away. You're still trying to like keep the pace and keep in touch with people and fill your days. We're all wired naturally to want to fill space.
Yeah.
Fill head space, physical space. Like it's just, we're just wired to do it. And it's this like unease with stillness, I think. And this is what I'm waking up to now more and more. I feel like every day is stillness is an invitation. It's not a void that needs filling. It's an invitation. And so when I woke up on my yoga mat, came to, it was like, okay, there has to be a void, and you can choose to fill it, or you can call it an invitation, and you can step into it, and it will teach you if you let it, but you have to let it. And so that was the beginning of me I'd been holding on to my, like, white knuckling my life in the palm of my hand.
Yeah.
And it was almost like God just, like, one by one pulled out my fingers and took what was it left in my hand and started to reshape what the day-to-day experience looked like for me as a young mother living overseas.
Yeah.
It was quite something.
Thank you for sharing.
Gosh, sorry. No,
No.
actually, I take that back. I'm not going to apologize for my tears, and here's why. I had a woman once, actually, at a conference a couple of years ago. I was, at the time, 6 months postpartum with Chloe. And here where I was at this conference, again, like imposter syndrome. And this woman who was a life coach, who I learned after the fact was from Vancouver and is, like, dear friends with a close friend of mine. She, like, took my face in her hands, put her palms around my face, and was like, Liz, I don't want you to ever apologize for your tears. And I think this is, like, a message for a lot of people that they need to hear. Like, please don't ever apologize for your tears, because they are beautiful and they give permission to other people to open up and, like, let down their guard. And, like, if we're going to talk about vulnerability and empathy in meaningful ways and not just, like, give it lip service, then somebody's got to break.
Yeah.
And you can break for people and you can be that person. And so I take back my apology because I told Lisa Carpenter that I would never apologize again, and I failed. So there you go. I'm making it right, Lisa. I am not apologizing for my tears anymore. The end.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I actually wrote a blog post one time about, I can't remember what I titled it, but I'll put it in the show notes. It's about basically that I'm going to stop trying to hold back the tears, because I cry very easily. And, like, the whole time you're telling this story, I had myself on mute because I'm crying. And, but, like, I find myself in these situations where I'm, like, at the pharmacy or, like, talking to somebody at church in the greeting time or something. And I'm, like, crying. And, the natural inclination is just to hold those tears back and try to hide it. But I love that, because I think, like you said, like, when you do that, it gives somebody else permission. I don't even think we're going to go there on this conversation, but I love that, because, like you said, somebody probably needs to hear that today, and that it's okay to cry and it's okay to be real with the emotions of that experience that you went through, which was incredibly, incredibly difficult. I can't imagine what that felt like and what that was like. So I just want to thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So I know there's, like, probably so many stories you could share that have happened since that time, but are there some specific things, like, what shifted after that for you in terms of how did you start to simplify your life? What did that look like in real terms?
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I mean, if we're going to start when we talk about, like, simplifying our life, I mean, gosh, if you search that online, good luck, right? There's, like, so much content to go through.
Yes.
Holy cow. We can talk about it. And how do you simplify your shoe wardrobe? How do you simplify your, like, you can break it down on all these levels. So if we're going to, like, if we're going to compartmentalize a little bit, we had to simplify or simply just to, like, make it from Vancouver to Scotland. That meant parting with a bunch of stuff. And so that was, like, our first little taste of, like, if you want to call it, like, minimalist living, I guess you could say, because we were moving into a student accommodation that was furnished and we couldn't take a lot with us. And so, we found ourselves working with, like, very, 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 very little in terms of our kitchen or our bedroom or closet space or whatever. We had to, like, legitimately, we just could not take things with us. So we had suitcases, and that was that. So that was the beginning of, like, the material simplicity in our life. Yeah. And it's so fascinating because I don't think I had ever paused to consider just how much my physical environment impacted my emotional state or my well-being. And it wasn't until we were living in a very remarkably different way that it started to affect me, for better and for worse, truthfully, that it's funny because I haven't done a lot of writing for publications, but I did write an article for Simplify before, about a year year and a half, 2 years before I took on the role as managing editor. And it was called Befriending Inconvenience, because when we moved to our first place in Scotland, it was like practically empty. And the barrenness of our home actually felt like it was like screaming at me. And this is, again, it's like that void thing, right? It's like if we're so used to filling the void with something and it has to stay barren and empty, like it causes us friction and tension. And so all that to say, the first domino to fall was like our physical environment. We had to simplify that. Yeah. And then of course it turned into, well, then our social calendar got real simple, because man, when you don't know people, your social interaction is like the person who calls your name at the coffee bar, or the person who's, asks you for money when they check your groceries through the till or something like that. Like it went really, really lean. And so it's almost like our whole existence, if we picture it on a chalkboard, it's like somebody wiped the whole thing clean. And then slowly, bit by bit, pieces started to come back together, whether it was we found something to put in our home, or like we met another couple, or then we found a church, made some friends, whatever. Our life started to come back together. But when epilepsy became a real thing, like a real opponent, it meant that I couldn't drive. I mean, we didn't have a car, but I absolutely could not drive. And so I was walking everywhere. It was a small town, thankfully, real cute, real quaint. If you haven't been, oh my gosh, if you haven't been to St. Andrews, please, please, for the love, go. It's so astounding and beautiful. But I was walking everywhere. There was just time. There was like time in my head. We didn't have any major appliances. We didn't have a dryer. So like I was washing my dishes by hand and hanging up our wet laundry and speaking to people. Sometimes it was just a lot of downtime in our life. And for the first time, I started to see the good fruit of that. I had always been wary of the idea of like going rural or like getting off the grid or something. Like it just never really appealed to me. But then we were sort of forced to do it. And yeah, I got to see the beautiful fruit in that. And then of course, as our life did start to become more multifaceted, you could say, or like three-dimensional, we started, engaging more with people and putting down roots and getting involved in our community. We were able to show up more. We were able to invest more in the relationships, the people around us. We were able to just be more present. Sometimes it sounds so cliche to be like, we were able to live in the moment, be more present. But like, truthfully, if you have experienced what it's like to be so numb and disconnected, and then you get a taste of the vivid, colorful experience of being in the moment and fully showing up alive, it is remarkable. And it is, in some ways, it's no wonder that if you search Simplify Your Life online, you get a fire hose of content, because it's worth writing about. It's people's like marked experience, and it shapes them, and it's a real thing. So once life started coming back, the pieces of our life started coming back together, we realized, now that we could care less about our home because it's a student accommodation and it keeps us warm and we're happy. We don't have to be like planning to decorate it or like putting our identity in the layout or the furnishings or like whatever, right? People get wrapped up in stuff. No more. Didn't need it. Didn't care about a whole lot of stuff. It was so freeing. It was beautiful. And so we had 5 years living in Scotland, and it taught me a lot about the value of walking. And I mean that both like literally and figuratively, because I think there's a lot to be said about slowing down and not pushing yourself. Walking is not, unless you're my mom, who's an amazing speed walker, you're not pushing yourself. You are taking it in as you go. You know where you're going, and yet you can pause and stop along the way. And at Scotland, I say, like, I learned how to run in Scotland. I trained for a half. It was great. But I also learned to walk in Scotland. And I mean that physically, like literally and figuratively. It was a really, really important thing. And so from Scotland, when we left and we came back to Canada, when my husband finished, that is when I actually got in touch for the first time with the fact that I had changed so dramatically, and that our pace of life abroad had been almost entirely the opposite of what it had been when we left Vancouver originally. And that was a huge wake up call. Ooh, boy. Ooh.
Yeah.
Huge wake up call.
It sounds like it was like culture shock in more than one way coming home.
Oh my gosh.
Is that true?
Honestly, Esther, holy cow. Yeah, totally. When we left Vancouver 2011, like at that point in the office, iPhones were just becoming like a bit of a nuisance, kind of like they were new. They were still kind of new, at least in Canada, because I feel like there was a bit of a lag for when they actually expanded over into Canada. And so it was like, you know what, guys, we have these things in our pockets and they're buzzing and like, they're kind of annoying. We should all, if we're going to have a meeting, everyone's got to put their phone in the center of the table face down. I was working on the creative team at that point. They had promoted me to be sort of more copywriting and lifestyle blog. I was managing the blog at the time. And the whole like smartphone thing wasn't really a problem. I didn't own one. I didn't really want one. I didn't care. But I was the only person in the whole marketing team who did not have a smartphone in those meetings to put on in the table. I didn't get like a legitimate iPhone until Lucy was like 2. So that would have been, 2015. Yeah, 2015. So if there's like this 4-year period in history now, it just sounds so weird to say, but like legit, this is the life we live now, where the rest of the world was just like up and up and up and up smartphones. Everything is phones now. Everything is social media. Everything is content. You just consume it from the palm of your hand. And I was like blissfully ignorant, walking on beaches with my kids by the North Sea with like the salt in my hair, loving my life, which sounds like idyllic and dreamy, honestly, because it was. There was like real life crap going on, but like it was bliss to be free of it. And so when we came back to North America, I did have an iPhone. It was super old and I didn't use it for a lot because I was not interested in it. But when I came back to the culture of, you know, here we are standing at the bus stop and everyone's just cast their heads down into their palms and they're ignoring the people around them and they're ignoring the beauty of the mountains. Like Vancouver is stunning. If anyone who's listening to this has been to Vancouver, they get it. Like the ocean, the mountains, it's stunning. And it was just so tragic to see humanity collapse into their phones every day, just like gray existence. And we're just going to look at these little pixels and have a meaningless life. It was so sad because of course it looks like you're not doing anything, but your mind is racing and your heart is pounding and you're like email apnea is a thing. You're not breathing deeply. You're not like getting the oxygen to your cells like you need to. It's a real thing. And that was a huge amount of culture shock. That and just seeing the layers of complexity where once there had been simplicity. So for us, that looked like there was a season where I could not go into a physical space, like a home, like a residence, without experiencing this heavy feeling of, oh my gosh, how long would it take to pack this up and move? Like, this like burden of like, oh my gosh, there's stuff everywhere. How like, because we had just, cleared up our home in Scotland and then we were moving from like place to place because our housing situation felt it's like a house of cards, basically. That's a whole other conversation. But the culture shock of like, everyone in the UK, everything is smaller. Roads are smaller, cars are smaller, portions are smaller, houses are smaller, everything is smaller. And then you come to North America and it's like wide lanes and, massive highways and huge portions. And I'm saying this like our experience coming to Canada, so you can imagine when then we went to the States to visit family, it was like you experience it all over again because the minute you hop south of the 49th, it gets bigger still. And we got a lot to learn here in North America now.
Yeah.
For sure.
So I'm curious, Elissa, if you can tell us how your faith played a role in this journey for you of simplifying.
Okay. When I had my big seizure, of course, then the question that everyone asks, right? Why? Like, why is this happening? Why do I feel this way? Why so disconnected? Why so discontent? Why? It's just the big question. And I think I've always been a journaler. I have like dozens of journals at this stage. And so naturally, after that experience of my first big seizure, I just went inward and asked a lot of questions and poured my heart out onto so many pages of so many journals. And it was healthy. It was very hard, but I think the solace of like being involved in a church community that cared for me and that stepped up to support me in the months that followed. Like, we had landed in the church in December, I guess, of that time. So it was like shortly thereafter we started becoming more engaged in our community. And I don't know, man, like, truthfully, I am still wrestling with a lot of questions. I'm asking God a lot of stuff to do with our family story lately. And there's a lot of trauma and healing that's taking place, or trauma that's being unearthed and healing that's taking place. And yet I know that God is so real and so faithful. And as I look back now, like, I think it was no coincidence that the song that we sung at our wedding was "Great is Thy Faithfulness," and that the scripture that we chose was, in the words of my father-in-law, because he gave a little bit of a homily before. Is it a homily? It wasn't the message, but whatever. He spoke at our wedding. When my father-in-law spoke at our wedding, he said that the passage from Sermon on the Mount where Jesus talks about, the lilies of the field and the birds of the air, and, don't you understand how you are so much more worthwhile, so much more valuable and precious to God than the lilies and the birds, and yet he cares for them and they don't lack anything. Like, we read that at our wedding. I think it was in light of just knowing that we would be leaving and that we would have real needs as, post-grad student life and whatever. But his dad called it a very unwedding-y passage, which is hilarious because Steve's dad is a scholar and he's bright as can be. So to use a word that was completely made on the spot was hysterical. But, like, those kind of things aren't coincidences. And so I would come back to that place and kind of like meditate on that, Lord, what are you trying to teach us? Like, when all we can do is seek you first because we just, there is no other option,
Yeah.
he shows up. And yeah, so I think, oh my gosh, here I go again. Look at the waterworks. Wow, they're everywhere. I think we have a tendency as people, we really like the illusion of control. It's great. It's really, really wonderful to pretend that we're in control. We might not realize we're doing it. This is one of the blessings of my seizure and living abroad in general. It's really nice to think that we have a 10-year plan or a 5-year plan, or honestly, like a 48-hour plan. We've had some crazy stuff happen in our life. And it's really lovely. That illusion of control is delicious and we savor it and people crave it. And a lot of people, they get to live in that illusion for a long time. But I think everyone's bubble bursts at some point. And so to experience the burst, to experience the downward spiral, the lack of control, and to see how, while it feels like you're in this complete tailspin, like God is holding it together and you're in that eye of the storm and it's actually quite peaceful because he has it. And you think you need certainty or you think you need the plan, but what you really need is just God's peace and his presence. And crazy, there's been a lot of stuff happening on our end lately, and I feel like I'm like preaching to myself practically right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my faith has definitely helped me be okay with being okay to open up my hand and see the things that I thought I needed and thought were necessary, like fall out for whatever reason,
Yeah.
Things like job opportunities that were certain that fell through, or just any the plans we have, right? We make plans, and when they don't happen, it's really challenging. It's one thing to experience that as an individual. It's another thing to experience that as a parent, a wife. I think once we really can like look at our stories with honest eyes and say, but God was in control and I had what I needed. I don't need to strive or prove anything. I am like, I hate the term I'm enough, because I feel like it's gotten to the point where people talk about being seen or being heard and being enough. And it's almost like sometimes words lose their meaning when they're used in abundance. And so
Right.
to say like, I know I am enough is true, absolutely true. But I don't know if it even gets to the heart of it.
Yeah.
Because it's an expression that is, teetering on being overused.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is a great peace that comes with knowing I don't have to strive. I don't my identity is in Christ, and I'm beloved before I even do a thing or have a thing or wear a title or perform or anything. There's great peace that comes with that. And I think for some people, simplifying their possessions looks like a really beautiful design spread, and they think that's going to make them happy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the truth, right? It's not the truth. It's like it's not an aesthetic, guys. We got to dig deeper and do the hard work and see the mess and the chaos in the places where it's less tangible, in our heads and our hearts. And sure, it spills out into our environments, in our calendars or whatever, but we have to know that we need to stop striving, and we need to be okay with the stillness and the void and not rush to fill it. It's kind of ironic timing for this, because I laughed when I saw your form that said, so if the show notes, fill in these things and social handles for people to find you. I had to laugh because I felt one of the things in my story that's really, God is teaching me that apparently I write emails well. I don't know. It's a strange thing. It's funny, recalling the story of how at Lululemon, that's precisely how I landed in my corporate gig, was people noticed my emails. But I remember seeing the cover of Chasing Slow when we came back from Scotland. And I remember picking it up in my hands and looking at it and thinking, this is a beautiful, beautiful book cover. And I like the title. And I remember flipping it over and reading passages in the bookstore. I didn't read it cover to cover, but I kind of thumbed through it and thought, oh, kindred spirit. Whoever this person is, she's probably delightful. And kind of filed that in the back of my mind, carried on my way, whatever. And then when the position for managing editor for Simplify totally landed in my lap, thank you, Lord, I was commissioned to write a piece about slowing down. And so naturally my head and heart kind of went back to Chasing Slow. And I thought, I'm just going to reach out to Erin Lochner and just tell her, kudos, high fives. I appreciate this book that you put out. And I've had fun coming back through and looking at passages and being reminded of the importance of letting things go and slowing down. And so she wrote me back, and it was really sweet, because I had certainly had no expectation of hearing back from her. And thus began the sweetest little online friendship of the year of 2019. We started writing back and forth a lot. And we were chatting Voxer style in December about just the insanity and craziness of social and whatnot. And she was saying, oh, I wish I could just hop off. And, now's not really the right time for me, but Lord knows, I would do it in a hot second if I could. And I thought, I think I'm going to. Instagram had, so for me as a writer, I had been blogging a diary in Scotland, and I had, writing on a blog platform, something I love, give the capacity to, do all kinds of fun things. But it was unrealistic given our life situation when we came back from Scotland. So Instagram was the crutch of I can keep people informed about where we are on the planet and what is going on in terms of we're moving here, just kidding, we're moving there, just kidding, that housing opportunity fell through. Oh, and by the way, now we're not moving to Australia and we're living in Knoxville. It was just crazy. Yeah. So it became our PR platform. But since we've landed in Hamilton now and we've been here for a while, it was no longer necessary for that, and it was more of a distraction. It's been a creative expression, but it has also been a very, very obvious distraction. And as I've been considering, now that I'm carrying baby number 4, and as I've been considering the disparity between walking those Scottish beaches without a smartphone with my two oldest, now the oldest,
Mm-hmm.
and the disparity between that and the North American equivalent, it's been really eye-opening. And so I told Erin, I think I'm gonna bail on Instagram for the holidays. Yeah, I'm gonna do it. And she was like, you go, you do it. So
Yeah.
a little like boxer fist bump, if that's a thing, I don't know. But I pulled the plug mid-December, and then it was amazing. Obviously, everybody knows, right? You unplug and it's like, oh, why don't we do this more often? This is great. So no big shocker there. But on the flip side of the holiday, my mom's mom, my Grammy June, she passed away in Florida, and Grammy was an amazing woman who wrote me letters and made these stunning handmade doll clothes and sent me parcels as a child. She always lived far away, but she always made the effort to show up in our life via the post.
Yeah.
So, or like hop on a call or whatever. And so when she on New Year's Day, she died. And it was sort of this moment for me of like, oh, this is literally a new chapter in my life. It's a new year. It's a new decade. And Grammy is gone. And what is my legacy going to be? 4 years ago, I wrote a little blog post on our family diary from Scotland, just saying like, what is the legacy for today? My grandma is just about to turn 90. This is her legacy. I am coming up to 30 at that point. I think I was like 29 when I wrote it. It's like, wow, every single day we have an opportunity to invest in ourselves, in the lives of others, in our communities, and how those minutes and hours and days and weeks form our lives. It's really an important thing to consider. And so I started running the numbers thanks to my phone. And I thought, this is not what I want to do. So I'm going to, and I spent the holidays going back through my Scotland diaries. And in doing so, I came face to face with that simple life and that mom who was able to be fully present, and the mom who wasn't concerned about storing up in houses and accumulating and trying to make a name for herself and juggling a big workload. And, we've got to do those things. We have to pay bills. We have to show up and provide for our families with what we can do. And, whatever we have, life, we can't just like all, hitchhike to the middle of nowhere and then get by, right? Like we can't kind of bury our heads in the sand. Sorry. We can go on holidays, but we can't do that. We can't do that for our life. But I did come to face with the reality that like, I won't ever get to go back to that stage in my life, but I can like bring pieces of that simple existence into my life moving forward. And the simplest way to do that is just to say, no, thank you, Instagram. God bless. I'll see you in 365, maybe if you're lucky, maybe never, who knows? I don't know. But I had a little chuckle because when you said, throw your social links down here, I thought, oh, well, that's kind of too bad.
Someone will have to like actually email you if they want to connect with you, right?
And I
or something like that.
I hope they do. Yeah, it's funny. I sent a message to Joshua and Brian and was like, if people are interested in reading up on practical, simple things, like we mentioned the content fire hose, but like truthfully, Simplify has been a beautiful thing to participate in because it's ad-free and it's quarterly. It's thoughtful articles written by people who are just really engaged in the subject matter. And I try to bring on a group of people who just like paint the subject matter with different colors and different ideas and perspectives and whatnot. It's really fun. So I told them, like, I guess I'll just tell people to go to the magazine. I don't. They can come and find me, and I would love them to. I do have a website for my personal writing, though it has been dormant for a very, very long while because, as you know, Esther, you and I talked about the writing thing taking place. There will be something coming to light, hopefully 2021, but that is like a proper thing of mine, and that will necessitate me to get back online. But for now, man, go to my website and email me. I would be thrilled. Email is my love language, apparently. So let's do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh my goodness, Elissa, I just feel like you have so much to share. And I know I know because we spent a few days together that we could talk for hours because we did.
We did.
But
Yes.
for the sake of the podcast, we might want to wrap it up. I think we basically just shared where people can find you is at the Simplify magazine. I'll also put your website for Elissa Joy Watts, right? That's what your person.
They can email me at editor@simplifymagazine.com. That'll go straight to me.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So we'll put that in the show notes. So I think the one thing we always ask our guests at the end is,
okay. Oh no.
We have a segment we call leaders or learners. And I really believe that people, those of us who are leaders want to always constantly be learning. So can you just share with us one thing, whether it's a podcast or something you've read lately, or just a lesson that God is teaching you that you think our audience might want to know about?
Oh my gosh.
I know it's hard to pick one thing.
Ooh, yeah. Oh man. Okay, so I have a couple books on my nightstand right now.
Okay, you can share more than one. It's okay.
But I think what I'm learning, like if we open the aperture, the big thing I'm learning right now is I'm like rediscovering what a hidden life is. Mm-hmm. And when I was going through my old journals, this theme of a hidden life, the richness of that, what it does for us, like on a spiritual level, is really important. And so I've been coming back through some Henry Nouwen work, specifically the book called Discernment. It came out, I think, in 2015, and it was comprised by two of his students who studied with him at Yale, and so it is posthumous. But it's called Discernment. It's one in a 3-part series. It's beautiful, but I'm learning about the hidden life and the joy of quietly stepping away. I'm kind of like relearning that. The thing that I'm learning more and more right now is like I'm geeking out over like how much money can we save on life in general, like budget hacks. So I've been having a lot of fun at the bulk food store. We're getting on well. Minimalistbaker.com. Shout out to Dana, doing great stuff. Batch cooking and nesting. This is like what I'm doing right now. So it's like all the baby, all the hormones. I'm just like, save money, plan for your home, make food for your family. That's all what's going on right now.
Oh, I love it.
But yeah, that's that.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Elissa. I know that you have your baby on the way. You've got lots going on at home, and I just appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us. And I know, speaking for myself and probably for a lot of the listeners, you've given us a lot to think about and a lot to consider in terms of how we're living our lives and where we're putting our trust. Like that was a big takeaway for me is where is my trust and who is it in? Is it in my stuff and in my accomplishments, or is it in the creator of this whole universe? So thank you for sharing.
Oh, my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. I'd say if there's one thing I would love to impart to the people listening, and this is kind of the direction where my creativity is moving for the foreseeable future, which we can take that offline. But one thing I would want to leave people thinking about is just like, if I can encourage you to not wait until you are figuratively face down on the floor with drool coming out of your mouth because you had to stop, your brain literally stopped on you. Like if you can get to a place of clarity and intention and action before it's too late, do it. Because while it is powerful to come to your end and realize you can't, that you like physically are not able to, like there's a girl in Brooklyn, her name's Jess Davis. She has this thing called Folk Rebellion. She's an amazing human being, and she like found herself like bent over having a heart condition in the middle of an airport between speaking gigs, and her whole thing is like, the internet's killing us and we need to slow down. And she was like, how ironic is this that I am a victim of what I am like trying to save people from, right? And so like she and I have kind of bonded on this thing of like, it sucks to come to the end of yourself. It's horrible to be in a spot where physically you're unable to do something, or like medically something changes and all of a sudden the life you knew before is gone. It sucks. And yet it is a blessing because you realize you never had certainty in it anyways. And now you get to open up and experience the opposite. You're forced out of it, and it's a blessing to be forced out of it. But I am also here to say, please don't wait until you're forced out of it, because you can choose to embrace a life that is more freeing and life-giving and just more in keeping in step with Jesus and like who we are supposed to be as people. And that's like dependent children, right? Like we're children of God, and we don't have to strive and prove and accumulate. That's not our thing. That's not how we reflect God's image. That's not who we are as children. We don't expect that out of our own children, right? Like we don't know. They're kids. They're little people. So don't wait till it's too late, teams. Let's just tear down, go easy, get some gin in a cup with some ice and tonic, and call it a day. After the baby comes.
Right.
After the baby comes.
After the baby. Oh my goodness. That's amazing. That's such a good note to end on. And I don't want to add anything to that. So
okay.
We will stop there. Thanks for joining us on the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider leaving us a rating and review in your podcast app? This helps more women just like you find the podcast. And it also helps them to know whether the podcast would be a good fit for them. Just go to the show in your podcast app, then scroll down until you see the option for ratings and reviews. From there, you can tap to rate and write a review. It means the world to us when you take a couple minutes to do this, and thank you so much to everyone who has left a review. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.